All right, so we're getting down to close to the end of the day here. Not quite there yet, so hopefully you all are here for a talk about application recon, the lost art. My name is Tony Miller, and that's why I'm standing in front of you, is I'm going to tell you all about this crazy stuff. So let me begin with who I am. Again, my name is Tony Miller. I am a principal application security engineer, I think is the official title, whatever that means. The more important thing, I spent 10 years as a developer working for a large financial services company. I've done another 10 years in application security. You can see up there a bunch of different technologies I've worked with, pretty much just about anything under the sun. We're missing some mean stack stuff and other stuff I've done more recently, but that wasn't as a true developer, so I guess I don't include it. Down here, the shameless plug, yeah, my Twitter handle, if for some ungodly reason you actually wanted to follow me or shoot me a question or whatever, I'm out there. Feel free. My email address as well if you guys want to email me questions, or I'm going to have a bunch of links in the slides. So if for some reason you don't catch them and you want them later, let me know. I will get you that information. Finally, if anybody really gives a shit at all down there in the bottom, that's my employer. This really doesn't represent them necessarily, but in case you give a shit, you know, there you go. I work for Aspect Security. Fair enough. That's the only time you're going to see that through this talk. So let me talk a little bit about where we're headed today. As I said, we're going to talk about application recon. Now, let's start. I know, guys, we're all geeks. We're all kind of shy. No one wants to raise their hands and shit, but bear with me, all right? Who out there, where are my pen testers, first of all? Who out there, you're doing pen testing as a job? Okay, I've got a few. Cool. So a lot of you guys are going to know already what I'm talking about when I say app recon. How many of you guys are developers out there? And the rest of you all just do something else. Cool. So for the developers, you're going to see, this might be a little bit of news to you, maybe not. But I'm going to tie it back to how this plays into a lot of the things you're doing too. So we're going to talk a little bit what app recon is. We're going to get into Google hacking, or more commonly nowadays they're calling it Google dorking. We'll go through some of the history real quick on that, but I'm going to show you some cool stuff. How we use our friend Google to do a lot of great things when it comes to getting reconnaissance on an application. I'll also show you how we can use some DNS records. And, you know, a lot of times application pen testers, you know, DNS, well, that's for those network guys. Why do I care what's in DNS? If I can get to the app, I'm happy. Well, there's a lot of really cool stuff we can find out from DNS that's going to help us with our pen test and might even, you know, point us in the direction of some vulnerabilities. I'll talk about how we can use social media. We love social media. Everybody loves to put all their information out in social media. And as a hacker trying to figure out what you're doing in your application, man, that's awesome. Thanks for the help. I'll tell you guys about some other sources too, and then we'll talk about how you put it together in your tests, how you put it together if you've got software out there, how you can use this kind of recon idea in more of a defensive strategy as well. I'll give you a bunch of tools. I'll give you a whole list of different tools you guys can use for this, but hopefully arm you with some information that you can use directly on your own. So I'm going to start with a little short story. But before I get there, sorry, we're going to talk about what app recon is first. You're going to hear it by different names. Some people refer to it as reconnaissance. Some people call it info gathering. Some people call it information discovery. And more recently, we're seeing this concept of open source intelligence, or OSINT. Call it whatever you want. I'm going out and I'm going to find out information about your application without actually having even touched your application. So in a traditional sense, if you guys are familiar with, say, the OWASP pen testing guide, or you're doing network pen tests for that matter, everybody always puts this is the first phase. I'm going to go out and I'm going to recon. Great. I'm going to gain all the information I can about your app or about your network or whatever it is, because I want to know what's going on in there as much as I can before I ever touch it. So with applications, we're trying to figure out maybe what kind of technologies you've got in use, what the breadth of that application is, things like that. Generally, that's going to be information that hasn't been provided to us. Now, if I'm doing it as part of my organization, I'm going out and I'm testing some internal app we have that we've developed that we're putting out there for our customers. I probably know quite a bit about that application. And sometimes, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, that leads to some complacency. where suddenly Recon isn't so important in our heads because we know everything about that app already. We work with it day in and day out. For guys like me who are consultants, yeah, it's a little more important sometimes because maybe I don't know everything about the app. But I think even as consultants, we start to become complacent. And we'll talk more about that. Generally, we're using publicly accessible resources. You saw Google up there before. We saw DNS records. You're going to see some other things. Social media. That's all stuff that's out there to be had. It's, again, that concept of open source intelligence. It's all there for us. We just got to use it and know how to find it. The concept that I want to stress here that's really important is we talk about it being this first phase. First phase is Recon. We're going to go out and we're going to do Recon. That's our first phase. We find out all the information, and now I'm just going to test your app. Well, anybody who's tested an app knows you get in there, and after a few minutes, you start finding some stuff that doesn't make sense. I can't think of too many apps I've gotten into where I got through the whole application, and I looked at, my burp logs or whatever, and yeah, that all made sense. I totally figured that all out just by using the app. So this concept of going back and doing more Recon after we have an idea of what the app looks like, what that landscape looks like. Maybe we see some technology in there, but we're not quite sure how they're using it or they're using it correctly. So we can use Recon to help us out there. So I'm going to tell you a little story. And this story explains why I'm standing here today. It was kind of my inspiration to put this talk together in the first place. So just so you know, I'm not preaching. I fall into the same trap as everybody else. I said, we as testers, we get complacent. We've kind of, more and more, we've moved away from doing this type of Recon. Here's my story where I kind of was reminded why it was so important. So I was called by a client. I was asked to go in, and they wanted me to test their single sign-on page. Now, how many of you guys were in Jason Street's talk this morning? Quite a few of you. So you remember him talking about the scope and bringing it from way out here to way down here? They literally wanted me to test the SSO page. So here we go. We're going to give you user IDs and passwords that can log in but have no access to any applications. And we've got a landing page so that after you successfully log in, it just says, hey, you're successfully logged in. Well, okay, so you can imagine right away the list of vulnerabilities you find when testing something like that don't extend very far. I think they had a cookie that maybe wasn't being marked secure, and weak password controls. Yeah, I had that one in there too. But beyond that, it was pretty lame. So I'm sitting there. I can't release a report that's got 2 findings on it. This is ridiculous. So when in doubt, turn to Google. We love Google. Google is awesome. I'm going to use Google's name a lot, but obviously a lot of what I'm going to talk about you can do with other search engines too. I would recommend that you try them all. They've all got different capabilities, different strengths and weaknesses, and definitely using all the tools at your disposal will help you out. But we'll start with Google. So in my test, I went out, I did a little bit of Google foo. I did a couple searches, started checking around, used some things I found in the application. Before I know it, I found all sorts of vendor documentation for the SSO provider that they were using. Just available in their website. I didn't even go to the vendor. This is all on the client's website, this random university I was testing. Some of the things I found in there were really cool. Okay, so they have these optional parameters. Now, when I'm logging into this SSO, all they did was give me this URL. There were no parameters. So I found out, oh, well, these are kind of interesting. That's cool. Redirect URI, which presumably is going to send me somewhere after I log in. This service identifier, which I later found out was used to identify which application it was that you were logging into. That was kind of cool. I figured out from there, the URL for the default web admin interface. So this SSO provider's got a web admin interface. Oh yeah, and by the way, it has a set of default creds. Well, that'll obviously get interesting. I also found out through some more Google hacking, just URLs for a number of the client applications that were out there. So after I found out, hey, we've got these these two parameters here, and I don't have the names up there because they would actually uniquely identify the provider, and I don't want to do that. But that's exactly how I started finding these URLs, was just by a simple search, and you'll see how we do it in a few minutes, just looking for those parameters in specific URLs. And finally, a list of service identifiers as well. I mean, great stuff, all of it out there, public domain, easy for me to discover. So my two finding report suddenly went to, I want to say there were 16 findings. Top 5. So here we go. Now I've got, and I apologize, I originally was going to have candy, but like all they had left out there was Mentos. I was going to give a candy for people who get this. But we're doing the Family Feud thing later, so we'll start now. Who wants to take a guess? Given the information I just gave you, who's got a guess at what one of these vulnerabilities is going to be? I heard direct browsing. That's your first strike, actually. Open redirect, who said it? That is the #1 answer, yes. Absolutely. First thing I see when I see a redirect URI as a parameter, well, holy shit, what can I do with that? Well, I can send you everywhere I want. And sure enough, completely unvalidated redirect, I could send you anywhere I wanted to go. Oh, that's cool. Other thoughts, other things that I talked about, what would be vulnerabilities I found out there? Yes and yes, you guys are together, so that's 2 and 3. So you guys are right down the list. So yes, I found that sure enough, this brilliant educational institution where I presume lots of people send their fine children to become smart, had the web admin interface exposed to the internet. God damn it! What are we doing? Worse yet, that wasn't enough. We really just wanted to screw ourselves over good. We didn't bother to change any of the creds on that web admin interface. So sure enough, default creds. Now my guess, to be fair, is that nobody realized this thing even existed. Because by default, you install it, you throw the web server out there, and hey, it was just available. And if you didn't make a concerted effort to change those creds, well, hey, they're there for you too. All right. Any other thoughts? The other two maybe not so obvious. I'll give them to you because, well, they're not as obvious from what I gave you. First of all, I did find cross-site scripting. So when I was no longer landing on that cool little page that they put together for me, but now realized I could send these parameters and kind of adjust how it responded to me, I got to another page, which was kind of like that intermediate, hey, you've logged in and now we're going to redirect you somewhere else page. Well, we're going to redirect you to this service that you provided us. Boom, cross-site scripting. Thank you. Have a good, nice day. Also, once I got into that admin site, well, yeah, CSRF. Beautiful. So now not only, even if we change the default creds, hey, maybe I fish one of your admins or somebody on the system, and there was all sorts of fun stuff I could do with changing people's profiles. So the point of all this is, this was my reminder, right? So I took this app and okay, the client provided me the information. I'm looking at, man, this is a tiny little scope. What am I going to do with this? There's nothing to do. I took for granted that I had all the information I needed. When I realized I wasn't going to get anything in this app, I kind of went back to basics, which is the whole point of this talk. All right, so what do we do? Well, man, if I go back and I do some recon, suddenly that's a far more impressive report than a cookie finding and, oh yeah, your password policy sucks. All right. So that brings us to where we are today. So jumping right into this, I want to start off with this idea of Google hacking. Now, anybody heard Google hacking, Google dorking? That term sounds familiar to a few of you. Awesome. So for some of you, this might be review. Maybe I'm going to give you some new material that you hadn't used before, some ways you hadn't thought of before. But for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Google hacking or Google dorking is just using advanced features in Google that exist today, some of them documented, some of them not so much, to do really advanced and deep searches. Google catalogs the freaking world. Everything's in there. So let's make use of that. Many of you might recognize the name Johnny Long. Way back, 2008, He wrote a book and presented on this idea at Black Hat. There we go. One of those Vegas ones, yeah. All right. Book's still out there. He wrote a second edition. I think second edition was 2010. So it's still old, but it still works. All this stuff still works. A couple tools came out. Site Digger is still available. We'll talk more about it later. It's had its issues because originally it used Google APIs, and Google found out what they were doing and using the APIs for, and they kind of shut it down. Google wasn't real happy about that. People started using it to hack things like Facebook. Started finding some very interesting and surprisingly easy attacks against Facebook using Google hacking. Out there now, and we'll talk more about it later again, is this Google hacking database. I'll give you a link to that one later on if you haven't seen it before. But a collection of, holy crap, all these Google search strings that will find you all sorts of great information that you might be interested in. So, types of things that we find with Google hacking. A lot. Files containing sensitive data. You'll see some examples of that. Anything from passwords, network information, vendor product information. Okay, maybe that's not so sensitive. In this particular case, for me, it was. Vulnerable server software. You'll see how, hey, I want to go find, well, in this case, I'll show you one. How do I find phpMyAdmin running? Well, set up attached to root. You'll see that. Definitely, this whole idea of, Wolf was up here before talking about DirBuster and finding all these directories. Well, what if I don't want to bang away at that website for 5 hours with DirBuster and create a whole bunch of noise there? Well, what if I go into Google and just use Google? It'll find me hidden directories. I can find administrative tools, all sorts of cool stuff. Now we're getting into this Internet of Things. Everything is connected. We've got cameras and washing machines, apparently. I guess Jason was talking about this morning. Holy crap, why do I need my washing machine connected to the internet? What the Jesus. But we can find them on the internet. And we use Google to help us. Web service endpoints, that's a great one too. If I'm testing, an application, maybe it's got some third party or, an API to allow their partners in, whatever. Great stuff. And just tons more. So some of those common operators. Now there's a bunch. I mean, you can go out, you can do a search for Google, advanced Google operators. You can get a bunch of lists. These are some of the more common ones that you're going to see in use, and definitely in some of my examples that you'll see in a minute. In URL, really simple. If I got a string, I want to find all search results that have that particular string in the URL. So, admin. That's a pretty common one. Site is really good if you're doing a pen test and you want to tie this down to one small site that you're working on, because it'll make sure that all the results come back from just that site. The in title is kind of interesting. You're going to see where that comes in handy in a few minutes. But in title just looks at the title tag on your web page. It's going to show up in the the top of your window if you're in Microsoft Windows, and hey, happy stuff. So I can look for pages that have that string in their title. This is great for identifying specific software. File type, if I'm looking for files of a specific type, so in this case a PDF, well, it's going to find me all PDFs on a particular, whatever meets the rest of the search criteria. There's some of these also have aliases to them, so file type, you can also substitute in ext for extension, and it'll do the same behavior. And then num range. This is one that caused all sorts of headache for Google. And it's been treated, they keep changing how they handle it. So for a while, because people were using num range to hack Facebook profile IDs and other things, and they were using it to discover credit card data on the internet, Google, for a while, limited it to where you could only run num range against 4-digit numbers or less. Now it seems to be open again. So I'm not sure, I'll be honest, I'm not sure, and I tried to find an answer. I don't know if they're filtering out credit card data or what they're doing, but you can now, again, do num range on a 16-character long number, whatever that value ends up being. So, cool stuff. So taking a look at some of the things that we can do. This is one of my favorites. I do this probably on just about every test I do now. In title, index of. As you can see, anybody, understand what's going on there. I think most of us do. You can see the search results. Where does index of show up in the title? Anytime I've got directory browsing enabled. So here's a whole list. And I thought to make it interesting, let's say, okay, where can I find some cool private information? So I just went looking for people's W-9s. And as you can see at the bottom there's a couple. There were a lot more. Now my standard disclaimer for all of this, I'm going to show you these. Doing the search is perfectly safe and perfectly legal. Clicking some of those links starts to enter that dubious territory of maybe, maybe not. So use it at your own risk, but it's definitely out there. You can see this one came back 98 results. You know, there's obviously many other options. This is one I actually stole from the Google hacking database. I'll give them credit for this one. This one was a Google dork that was out there, but I liked it. In title, my PHP admin running as root. I love this one. And this one I did actually, I'll admit, and if there's law enforcement out there, I may end up in handcuffs at the end of the day. All I did was I clicked the one link from Google. It took me to this page. I swear I didn't do anything past that. But that's pretty wide open. We're running as root, and I didn't have to log in. So you can kind of start to see where these things lead. Some other ones, I kind of mentioned this before. What if I look for, this is how I find admin sites a lot of times. This is a great one. Just find in the URL, /admin. Maybe look for login in the title. So now I've got my admin login page. This is where I start to find WordPress logins all the time. You could also do a search actually for WP admin. That helps sometimes too. But I mean, you can see, okay, I've got, you know, admin logins for all sorts of cool applications here. And what I have, 206,000 results. There's a few of them out there. They're out there to be found. So maybe I'm testing that SSO page, looks great, but that's all it is. I now put in that site and say, hey, find me admin in the URL and log in. Hey, now I find that, and I didn't even need the vendor documentation, and I could have found it just with Google. Anyone know what this is? Does this look familiar to anybody? Anybody ever heard of Axis cameras? Yeah, this is cool stuff. All right, so if I want to go find people who have their surveillance cameras available on the internet, good Christ, people. Sure enough, yeah, these are all cameras. I will admit to having clicked on at least one of them and observed a live feed of their particular facility. That was interesting. Do no harm, right? Do no harm. I just clicked the link. It was there. I didn't do anything. It just showed me cameras. I swear. So interesting stuff. This is where we start to get into the Internet of Things. Now I have to go and I have to figure out where this washing machine thing is, because that's got me intrigued. This is a great one for finding .NET web services. Okay, very simple. Just in the title, looking for web service, and hey, file type of .asmx. That's perfect. Done. Game over. And as you can see, when you hit most of these, they're nice enough to provide you a really great summary of how their web service works. Thank you, British Council. Appreciate it. That was really educational, by the way. Now, there is a catch to all of this. When you start doing this with Google, Google has gotten smart. They know people have been doing this. You will start to see this page after a few tries. As far as I know, I haven't gotten called by the FBI yet. You do have to type through this. It makes it take a little longer. It's kind of a pain in the ass, I know. But you will start to see it. I think we're safe. Google has, no one's showed up at my door just yet. Although, you know, maybe I should check my phone. But no, they are doing everything they can to try to limit it so people aren't scripting this stuff, so forth. You know, understand how Google is. Fair enough. So some tools that help you do this. As I said, Site Digger is out there. Its last release was 2009. It does still work. They've updated it enough to keep it working. The results are hit or miss, but it does tie in with the Google hacking database, so it at least pulls in a fair amount of results from time to time. A newer one that's out there, it's a little easier. Bishop Fox, I don't know if they bought it or how they ended up with it, but ultimately Search Diggity. This one's really cool because it does a lot of stuff with throttling so that you can avoid detection by Google or other things out there that might be watching you, maybe your own internal proxies. So if you want to limit the noise, it's really cool. It's got a lot of really cool features. They're both graphical interfaces. They're really easy. You can tell them what searches you want them to run. You can give them custom searches. They do all that great stuff for you. So you can build up your library, as I have, of different Google dorks that you're going to run and fire them up based on categories and so forth. Either of these tools works really nice. I've got them both on here. If someone wants to take a look at them later, we can definitely do that. But so that's Google hacking. Now, like I said, this is all specific to Google, but other search engines are capable of the same things. Now, some of them have different operators. The operator names just change, but they're all capable of doing it. And indeed, I use Bing, I use Yahoo, I use a couple, because they've all got their strengths and weaknesses and how those operators work. Great stuff when you're trying to recon an application, and it really doesn't take that long. So moving on from Google hacking, I said I was going to talk to you about DNS records. There's a lot of stuff to be found in DNS records. It's not just for network folks, kiddos. No. One of the biggest pains in the butt as an application tester is when you encounter an application where I use it once and I've got a vulnerability. I come back to it later to get my screenshot and now it's not doing that anymore. Then I try it again tomorrow and it's doing it again. Oh. A lot of times, this is the cause right here. Round robin DNS. I end up on a different server because we all know that, when developers and organizations deploy code, they always deploy the exact same code to all of the boxes all the time without fail, perfectly every time, right? So this is a really good thing. If you're seeing something like that in particular, it's a great way to find out, hey, is that what's going on here? Just a good way, even on the way in to doing a test, now you know what to expect. Okay, I'm going to see some behavior that might change. I'm going to see different hosts that are a part of this. That can be important information to know when you're jumping into a test. Another great thing, what about where is the application hosted? Yay, cloud, right? Everybody loves the cloud. It's all about the cloud, our newest buzzword. I should have been counting today how many times already I've heard the term cloud from folks in the vendor area. Being what it is, hey, simple search, let's find out where is openbsd.org hosted. So my quick NS lookup, find out where it's at, and there's any number of tools I can use. Well, in this case, cool, it's hosted at the University of Alberta. Fair enough. It's up there in Edmonton. Hey, it's cold up there, guys. Again, great information to know, especially if you're testing on behalf of somebody else. More than once, I've gone into a pen test, and yes, we give you all the permission to test this, blah, 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 great, wonderful, and oh yeah, after I start testing, shit, you're hosted in Rackspace. And you didn't notify Rackspace. And Rackspace isn't happy because they didn't know this was coming. So, this can be a good way to save your butt in a situation like that. For those of you working inside an organization, it might be helpful just to know for sure that it's in a specific data center. Make sure that you're ending up where you think you're ending up. Using more DNS, here's a really cool tool. It's called Subroot. Subroot is pretty much what the name implies. If I want to brute force out a bunch of the subdomains on your particular domain, I run this cool tool. Here's the results from running it against Google. It's got a lot of different options. I just ran it as default, just said, hey, run against Google. And you can see it just does a dictionary brute forcing of all sorts of different subdomains. You can see just the list piles up. There's something like a couple thousand in there for Google, as you can imagine. But this is great too. So I'm sitting here, I'm testing, www.whatever.com, and it turns out that there's also auth.whatever.com or auth.www.whatever. They're out there. So this is a great little tool. Keeps it silent. You can feed it your custom word lists. It's awesome. Cool. Great. Great stuff. So DNS, Again, it's not just for the kids anymore in the network side. We get to use it on the app side too. It's got good information for us. It can lead us to places we didn't know existed. All right, everybody's favorite topic, social media. Social media has become a phenomenal tool for the pen tester. I hope you realize this is where, as developers, you might start to see already some connections of why this might have some impact on you. How many of you developers go out to Stack Exchange, post, hey, I'm working on some function trying to do something and I can't understand how to get this particular string to come back in whatever format I need it, right? Well, that's great information, and as a pen tester, I might like to find. So if, as a pen tester, I happen to know the developer's name, or maybe through some of that Google hacking, I pulled a developer name or two or an email address out of some source somewhere, maybe. Hey, I'm going to head out to social media and just take a look. Check the MSDN forums, maybe the Eclipse community. If I can find you out there, find the questions you've been asking, some of those might have little snippets of code that pertain directly to the application I'm looking at. That might be cool stuff to know. Sweet. So, when we start getting that kind of insight, now I've gone beyond even, say, if I'm in a gray box test and I don't have any code, I've just got an application and some info. Now I start pulling your code. I win. Believe it or not, LinkedIn, developer blogs, Facebook even. Now, you're getting, I'll admit, you're getting kind of desperate when you start looking at this stuff because it takes a lot of effort to find. But sometimes this can be useful. Just looking at the statuses people are posting or their blog posts. Hey, I'm working on this or that or the other thing. And again, I've connected you to this organization through some way because I found your name somewhere, or maybe I'm working directly with you. I've done that. Hey, you know what, I'm gonna do a little Google stalking on you and find out, okay, I'm testing your app, I'm gonna find out all about you. What are you working in? What are the technologies? Looking for your rants. Find some epic rants out there that give you all sorts of information about what's going on in a particular application. Killer stuff. Sometimes even just a skills list. If I look at you on LinkedIn and I can see that, you know, I'm working on an app, I'm not really sure based on behavior what exactly technology we're using. We're using some type of weird templating or something. I don't know what's going on. Take a look at your skills list. What are the things that you say you're working in right now? Maybe under your current employer, you tell me all sorts of great stuff about, yeah, you know, we're doing Node.js and we're you know, using Mustache or whatever, you know, all these great, wonderful things that are out there, great tools. Well, now you tell me about them. I know a little bit more of what I'm looking for, what I need to be up to speed on. Here's another one. Now, again, we're getting kind of to the bottom of the barrel of things that I might check, but sometimes there's good information out there. Checking either the corporate career page or a third-party job site. Again, are they trying to hire developers? What skills do they want those developers to have? What kinds of things are they exposing just through a job posting about their development environment? Does it give me clues, things that I can use? Oftentimes the answer is yes. When we move on beyond social media, there are other places we can look to. Everybody's aware of document metadata, right? How many know, first of all, that things like PDFs and Excels and Word docs put all sorts of your personal information in there that you don't type yourself? Okay, most of you know this. Good. If you didn't know that, you know it now. Those awesome document generators, those word processor apps, they leave all sorts of stuff in there. Excel puts all sorts of great information in there. And if I can go out and discover that, you'd be amazed at things I find. Usernames all the time. Anybody that's using Microsoft Office in a corporate environment, 99 out of 100 times their username shows up in that document metadata. So if we're posting Word docs to the web, hint, hint, there's a tool in Word that'll strip that crap out. Use it. But we'll find all sorts of stuff. Network info, MAC addresses show up in there, IP addresses sometimes. We'll even get operating system information, tells me, obviously what version of the software you used, which I probably could have figured out from the file anyway, but I'll find out more stuff about the operating system in use that was used to create that file. That may or may not be useful to me, but, it gives me some clues. Git repositories are becoming freaking treasure troves right now. This seems ridiculous, right? So I go out to GitHub. I can get a private repository, right? I can create a repository that's secured. It's just in my company, whatever. You would be amazed the amount of source code I have found for applications I've tested in GitHub in the public space. Now, they're not, it's not Bank ABC's online banking as a repository in GitHub, no. But that same developer maybe did some work on a different app or, put together his own little library of things and has that posted to GitHub, and then you go and you back and you look at that web app that he was working on and holy shit, he's using it in there too. Well, now I've got the code. I win. Sweet. Love it. Port scanning, another one that's not just for network people anymore, kids. Port scanning, we're not going to find a lot of from an application perspective, but we are going to find some. A lot of times those admin tools run on a different port, right? I've got my website running on 443, so where do I put my admin tool? Let's see, 444 sometimes, 8080, 8081, right? So a lot of times, a quick port scan, just fire up Nmap real quick, see what it does, see what else is running out there. If you see web servers on other ports, and you can justify it being in scope, maybe take a look. Let's see what's going on out there. Hey, it's the same URL, I just changed the port number. Sounds like it's in scope to me. And vendor websites. I think, was it Jason? Somebody mentioned this one this morning too. And I was so glad when they mentioned it, because I'm like, yes, that's in my presentation. Vendors love to brag about who's using their stuff. Go out to any, you name it, corporate software site, whatever it is, CRM tools or, Salesforce or any of those others, they all love to brag, hey, here's all these companies we have using our stuff. Well, that makes it really fun because now I know what I'm looking for. If I'm just looking for anybody random to screw with, that can be great information. That's, again, not a little dubious here as we talk about the ethics of that, but sure, there's some great information for you. Those are some folks maybe you want to target. So, bunch of ways that we can find information about our apps. How do we put this into practice? So from a black box testing perspective, this is almost a must, right? If I've got a black box test where I've been provided maybe nothing more than a URL, if even that, I've got basically zero information on this app. This is oftentimes, doing app recon will be the difference between me having a no findings report and me having a stack of findings that leaves them screaming and kicking. This can be killer. From a gray box testing perspective, again, like I mentioned before, as a consultant myself, I got complacent. I talked to a lot of people after I did that test that kind of inspired this whole mess. And it was interesting the number of people I talked to, and I asked them the same thing, like, what do you do for app recon? Huh? What do you do when you test? What recon do you do? Oh, I don't do anything. We have our kickoff meeting, and they tell me everything. Well, holy crap. So it's not just me. So a lot of us are getting complacent on this. Even if they gave me tons and stacks of information, did they really tell me everything? Did everything they tell me actually have reality connected to it? Okay, how much of that stuff really is true? Go out and verify these things. You're always going to find things you didn't know. You're going to find things that will clue you in to different attacks against that web application. So this is a great thing to work with. From a developer perspective, I think some of you have probably started to see already some of the defensive strategies you can employ here. First of all, you can go out and do a lot of these same types of info gathering just to understand what it is, what information is out there in the public domain that an attacker coming after your website can use. What are they going to discover? When we go out there, do we have a bunch of metadata hanging out in our documents that are on our website? what's out there that these people are going to discover and what can we strip out of there? It might also do you good to kind of look at yourself, right? Google yourself. How many people Google themselves? Because we're all vain and we want to see how many times we show up at the top, right? But no, it's good stuff. I mean, look at what's out there. How much have you put out there on, Stack Exchange, MSDN forums, Facebook, LinkedIn, anything else that could be connected back to the work you're doing on these applications? That's all stuff that some jerk like me is going to go out there later and try to find so I can go and manipulate the crap out of your app. That's what we do. So being aware of that, using that in a defensive strategy is huge. So let's talk tools. I promised you guys tools. Everybody loves tools. Tools make our lives easier. You've seen some of the things with Google hacking. You've seen hopefully you've got some ideas now running through your head of, oh, gee, I could go discover this or that with some cool little Google dorks. We'll show you some tools that'll help you along the way. Google Hacking Database. I mentioned that before. This is a great resource out at ExploitDB. If you haven't been there before, I highly recommend you check it out. They have tons and tons and tons of Google dorks, just simple search strings. They've got them categorized, so if you want to go look at the Internet of Things, you want to find specific devices, go out there, they will give you tons of different strings. The best part is it's an open community you can contribute it to, so if you have one of your own, a favorite that you use, you can go ahead and contribute that to the database. It's great stuff. That is awesome anytime, especially if you're working with a particular technology and you want to go Google hack it. Go out there, check it out. You'll probably be able to find a Google dork that'll help you search for it. How many people have heard of Shodan before? Oh, that's awesome. You don't know how many times I asked that question and everybody's looking around at each other like, what the hell did he just say? No, Shodan is awesome. So Shodan is basically the catalog of all internet servers everywhere. It is the coolest thing ever. You want to know what servers out on the internet are running a particular version of some vulnerable software that they just launched an ODA for, Shodan's your answer. Shodan's really good too if you want to go out and you just want to explore for different crap that's on the internet that shouldn't be. Go to Shodan. They got great stuff for you. But you can search it by host name. So if you're testing a particular host and you want to find out more information really quickly, really easily, head out to Shodan. Put it in, find that host. You'll get lots of great information that they've already collected for you. Save you some time and save you some trouble with Google. Maltego is a huge monster tool that does some really cool stuff. So what Maltego does, essentially, the only way I can term it is it's relationship mapping. So Maltego will go out there and it will use everything from DNS records to metadata and files and whatever. It will map out people and hosts and applications and show how they're all interconnected within a given scope. This thing is a monster. It kicks butt. So if you're really looking out there, especially from a defensive perspective, this is a great tool to really see the extent to which all these little seemingly unrelated pieces of information suddenly create a huge map and picture of your entire world for any potential attacker. Maltego's great. Some more tools. Folka. So Wolf was up here before, he kind of mentioned this, he gave you a quick screenshot of it. Folka is a great metadata gathering tool. It'll go out and it'll explore metadata within multiple different types of files. It uses search engines, it uses, it pulls in network info from DNS and from Aaron and so forth. So it'll give you a lot of information, a really good wide-ranging view of what's going on within a particular website or within that particular web application. This one's really slick. All graphical, so I mean, it's for those of you that really like the GUIs, you're all set. I tried to say this 100 times, I can never get it out. MetaGoofle. This is another one. This is another metadata tool. So similar to Folka, although it focuses more on the metadata side than on some of that network stuff. This one was actually included in Backtrack. I don't know if it's still there in Kali. I admit I didn't look. But it's out there to download either way if you're not using a Kali or Backtrack distro. Great one for, again, discovering metadata, another graphical interface. It'll go out there, do all sorts of discovery for you, lays it all out real easy, pulls in the files, it searches them for things like usernames or other common things that might show up in those files. It's got its own internal search capability that then you can customize and have it search for specific things, specific signatures, and so forth. Great little tool. And then the last one for my Firefox users out there. This is really cool. Passive Recon. As you can see from, oh, actually, I didn't put the other URL up there, sorry. No, this is just a plugin for Firefox. And it's really cool. You get into Firefox, you go visit the site that you want to take a look at. Right-click, right there in your context menu is Passive Recon. It'll pull up DNS records. It'll pull up all sorts of different metadata information, everything you want to know about that website, available with a single right-click. It's really cool, really slick. I highly recommend this one just because it's so simple to use just while you're browsing through their application, collecting data, or doing your first steps of hacking a website. Great stuff. So ultimately, I hope that from this, you guys, if you take anything out of here, it's the importance of some of this Recon and what it can mean when we're trying to assess an application. As I said, it became apparent to me from my own failures in this regard, and then from talking with my peers, how complacent we've become on this and how important this can be. You've seen some of the examples in Google. Use your creativity. I'm sure as some of those examples were up there, you guys had things going in your head. I encourage you to explore with it, play around with it, see what things you can discover. Look at that Google hacking database, see what's in there, and get some ideas from that as well. Dig into some of these tools. They're a great thing to add to your arsenal. Certainly, you guys, you saw my information up there. If you've got questions about them, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. Hit me up through Twitter, shoot me an email. Other than that, I really appreciate you guys. You've been great. Thank you for your participation. I was a little worried because it's 3 o'clock. People kind of fall asleep. So have a great conference and take care, guys.